The funny thing is, Bob and I sit here and start talking about what we're going to talk about on the show. And we end up doing the first part of the show, and we're not even live. We're just talking like we're doing the show. So, yeah, I think from now on, we might end up just turning it on live and just going. It's just funny. It really is. Welcome, everybody, to another exciting episode of Under the Dome. It's the off-season edition. Last week, we had a lot of new people join in, a lot of great questions. Really, really, really enjoyed that. So we didn't get a chance to talk about some of the best ever defensive players. And lo and behold, the Saints announced this year's class, 2025 class, to go into the Saints Hall of Fame. Brett Maxie, part of the old Dome Patrol defense, and also Super Bowl hero, NFC Championship game hero, Tracy Porter also got in. And I was reading your post as I was getting ready to post it. Ed Daniels, WGNO Channel 26, the ABC affiliate here in New Orleans, longtime sports director, host of Saints Sideline, creator of the high school. It's not really a highlight show. It was like high school football show that came Friday night football. When I was growing up, when I was in high school, we did not have a high school focused sports programs, a half hour on just high school athletics, high school football. We didn't have that. And New Orleans used to have a golden age of high school football before we had NFL teams in the 50s and the early 60s. So this was a big comeback for high school athletics in the state. And Ed Daniels was responsible for getting that for the New Orleans side. And then, of course, Steve Gleason, the block punt man, the man of no white flags, the man who's been living with ALS and still going strong. I am so impressed with that. I mean, there is something special about the fact that he can last as long as he has, and the life that he has created for himself, and helping other people who have suffered from ALS, getting them the technology to still be able to communicate just with their eyes. Just an amazing human being. Well, he received it's called the Heroes Courage Award. I know I'm going to end up calling it the Profiles in Courage Award, the John F. Kennedy Award, but the Heroes of Courage Award. So I don't know. Is Gleason in the Saints Hall of Fame? I'm pretty sure he is as a player.
Not as a player. I think he was awarded the Fleur de Lis Award, which is what Ed Daniels received this year, posthumous. After death. I can't say that word. I apologize. Technically Steve was already in there. Also technically not as a player, which, I mean, if you look at what he did on the field, his on-field exploits as a player doesn't really warrant Team Hall of Fame consideration. But like you said, you won't find a stronger or more courageous person or family. I mean, his family and wife in particular, have been with him every step of the way. The Saints basically invented an award to give to Steve Gleason, but I'm happy that they did, because there's no person on the planet, worth an award created specifically for him more than Steve Gleason.
Absolutely. And the Fleur de Lis Award was originally named the Joe Gemelli, and they still use that name, Joe Gemelli Award. And those of you who have not grown up in New Orleans, Joe Gemelli was a suit salesman back in the day, back in the 60s and 70s, and he had a store on Veterans, and he was a diehard Saints fan, big active person in Touchdown Club, the whole bit. And because of his promotion of the team they named this award after him after he passed away. So yeah, huge Saints fan, and I can still picture the sign, Joe Gemelli. I used to see it every day, driving up and down Veterans. So, what's this? Yes, Jim Henderson is in there as a broadcaster. Yeah, Jim Henderson got in there a while back. In fact, I think he and Hokie are the only two broadcasters in there.
As far as I know, you're right.
I don't know if Wayne Mack is in there. Wayne Mack only did it for a couple of years. I have no idea about Buddy Alberto either. I'll have to look for that. It's been a while since I've been in the Saints Hall of Fame Museum. It's in the Superdome now. Used to be out here in Kenner. And it's been a while since I've gone through the Hall of Fame Museum. It's bigger, a lot more things are there now.
Good.
They still have my favorite section, which is they saved a section of bleachers from Tulane Stadium. You can sit on the bleachers there and watch Saints highlight videos like the one behind me for any year or whatever they're showing. And they've got a lot of cool paintings, a lot of cool pictures in there. I really like it going in there. But it's been a while since I've been over there. When they were in Kenner, they were kind of cramped for space. So now Tracy Porter going to the Saints Hall of Fame Museum or the Saints Hall of Fame. That was a given. I mean, you pick off Brett Favre to seal that game. You pick off Peyton Manning to seal that win. You're going into the Hall of Fame just for those two plays alone.
No doubt about it. As a matter of fact, Brendan and I were discussing it last week on the Bayou Blitz, and we were kind of joking because the prior year or one of the previous recent years when we were talking about players who should be in or players that will undoubtedly be in once they're eligible. We actually thought a couple years ago that Tracy Porter was already in. Exactly because you mentioned it. So, I mean, it was pretty much a foregone conclusion that Tracy Porter was going to be in the Saints Hall of Fame someday, just for those two plays alone. But I mean, in addition, he was a pretty good defensive back and had a really, really strong 2009 season, as it felt like everybody in that uniform had a strong 2009 season.
Well, and the funny thing is, before it's all said and done, I think almost everybody on that team is going to be in the Saints Hall of Fame. If you started that year, you're going to be in the Saints Hall of Fame. Special teams players, Chris Reese, of course, Thomas Morstead, of course, Garrett Hartley. But, it's just so many players because you are on the team that won it all, the only team that won a championship. So they're all going to be on there. So it's going to be, we're going to do a best of on defense later on in the show. But that's the theme, I think, of these best of teams. Older players are going to slowly get pushed off the list because we've had so much more talented players come in who achieved far more as Saints than, say, an Archie Manning, although he'll never come off the list. But Archie Manning, for example, because just his teams were not as successful. Chuck Muncie, Tony Galbraith,
Quinn
Early will slowly get pushed away in favor of these newer players because they are achieving so much more success than their predecessors, which is kind of a shame because what I really enjoy about seeing the Saints Hall of Fame is these guys who didn't win but were great players got recognized for that. There's Brett Maxie right. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that is Brett Maxie right there. I thought that was Gene Atkins at first. I thought it was 28. So Brett Maxie's a good segue. Brett Maxie now. He got into the Saints Hall of Fame. It took him a little while. Now he is first part of the first division champions here in 1991. He came as an undrafted free agent Once again, going back to guys that we all talk about, Pierre Thomas, Lance Moore. Here's another undrafted guy who ended up having a huge impact for the team. How would you describe Brett Maxey's career?
I underrated. Both him and Gene Atkins. It's hard mentally, emotionally to separate them because they were such a good tandem back there in the secondary. An outstanding combination of hard hitters and ball hawks. When people talk about that era of the Saints, they talk about defense, obviously, as they should. And the first words out of their mouth are usually the dome patrol, as it should be. But that defense was so much more than just those four outstanding linebackers. They had arguably one of the league's best defensive lines at the time, and we'll talk about a couple of those defensive linemen here in a little bit. But Gene Atkins and
Brett Maxey.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, thank you. Gene Atkins, Brett Maxey. I'd throw Toy Cook in there too for a period of time. They were really a strong secondary. You wouldn't, at least I didn't at the time. I didn't necessarily consider them as a unit, one of the better secondaries in the NFL. And Maxey, along with Atkins, were overlooked in league circles at their own respective positions too, because you had the Ronnie Lotts, the Dave Dewersons, the Steve Atwaters, the Dennis Smiths, so much, the Kenny Easleys, the elite safeties. But to be fair, Maxey and Atkins were not necessarily in their league, but that defense, those defenses, on those Mora teams, they wouldn't have had that kind of success without the success and the talents of Brett Maxey and the others in that secondary.
Well, yeah, and the physicalness of that secondary. It's funny because in '87, which I almost put the '87 highlights on up there first, Maxey was really a special teamer in '87. He was part of that team. But he was behind Antonio Gibson and Van Jakes, who were guys that Moore brought in from the USFL to kind of lead his defense. And Maxey and Atkins both worked their way in to replace those guys, which is one of the reasons why they felt comfortable letting Dave Waymer walk and go to the San Francisco 49ers, because they felt like, okay, Waymer, we'll move you to safety. You're a better safety and you're a cornerback. But we've got these young guys up here who are bigger hitters, better ball hawks, even though Waymer has set the record for the team of total interceptions, breaking Tommy Meyer's record. They still felt like, look, we got two young guys who really can stop the run and cover a lot of space. So I think it's a tremendous credit for an undrafted guy to work his way up through the ranks and become part of an elite defense. Honestly, the weakness always was who plays opposite Toy Cook, because that's where they sort of went through a lot of players. They went through, they started with Antonio Gibson, but they went through guys like Reggie Sutton, who couldn't stay off the drugs. They had Reggie Jones, who was probably the best corner to go opposite him, Cook. But they kept trying, Robert Massey, who they ended up trading to Detroit, but they spent a second-round pick on him. They went through a lot of guys trying to figure out who can we get to play in that spot. And it ended up being Reggie Jones and Toy Cook are the two best corners at that time for the team. Steve Gleason, we've talked so much about him. Just an amazing, amazing human being. But Ed Daniels, how much do you know about Ed Daniels?
Not a lot. Other than if you're going to categorize if you're going to list the founding fathers or a Mount Rushmore of Saints media, Ed Daniels has got to be on there. What Saints media is today, what I do remotely from home, 1,400 miles away. It wouldn't be possible without guys like Ed Daniel, who set the groundwork, who set up the framework for what we're able to do today. Really pushed out the New Orleans Saints culture to the fans. And that I never met the man personally. I have gotten to know and or work with a few of his mentees. Ken Trahan. I love Ken's stuff. I have worked very closely with Eric Asher, especially around the NFL draft every year. Those guys were basically mentored by guys like Ed. And like I said, if you're gonna, I didn't have the fortune to get to know him at all personally, but I didn't get to know George Washington or Ben Franklin or any of those. I'm not that old, guys. Any of those guys either. But again, if you're going to mention the founding fathers or a Mount Rushmore of Saints media, it's got to start with Ed Daniels.
Yeah. So I grew up in the era of Hap Glaude and Buddy Diliberto being the Saints voices.
And Buddy and Jim Henderson are two more I'd put on there, by the way.
Of course, Jim Henderson comes along after Hap Glaude retires in the late 70s, 78, 79. And he ironically came from Atlanta. So there were a lot of people upset that Jim Henderson is coming. Who the hell is Jim Henderson? Hap Glaude had been there since the 50s. He had been a New Orleans mainstay. The fairgrounds, the racetrack, Jefferson Downs, which doesn't exist anymore, but Jefferson Downs racetrack. He was all about the track, and New Orleans was a horse racing town before it became a football town, really. But he was a Tulane guy, and so Hap Glaude was like Mr. New Orleans. So it's a very difficult clique, and that's the reason why I'm bringing this up. It's a very difficult clique to break into because
it still is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got to be. What's the question they always ask people from New Orleans? Where'd you go to school? Not college, high school. Because you got to say one of the high schools in New Orleans. If you don't say that, then you're an outsider. Because if I went to De La Salle, so people know that. Oh, you're a Cavalier. You were on St. Charles Avenue. I know where you were. Jesuit, Holy Cross, Brother Martin. If you're old New Orleans public school kid, McDonough 35, Warren Easton, Carr. All those schools have a reputation among people, and the Catholic League was huge. So Ed Daniels was able to come up through that and earn his respect. He wrote for the Clarion Herald, which is a Catholic newspaper. It comes up and you read the newspaper in church, but it was a Catholic newspaper, and there's a sports column in the middle. Pete Finney's son wrote for that. Pete Finney was another one that going back to old New Orleans, Times-Picayune writer. Because I said horse racing town, they were also a boxing town, and they would write about boxing. So it's just, oh Lord, here we go, Anna Abramson. Okay, so Abramson's is a school from down in the parish, out there in St. Bernard, and Abramson was one of the only public schools. Abramson and Chalmette were the only public schools in 11 Quad A, the Catholic League and the old Catholic League when I was there, because I'm old too, Anna. And I knew we weren't going to win many football games at De La Salle, but we were going to beat Abramson. We were going to beat Chalmette. That's all I knew. But anyway, Ed Daniels wrote a lot of the stuff in the Clarion Herald about Saints football. Buddy Diliberto used to do that until 2006. Then he passed away. I thought it was Chalmette. Okay, New Orleans East. That's practically Chalmette. I know Chalmette High's in Chalmette. I know that. Gaud's country, Gawd. Gaud. But I remember the first time I went out to New Orleans East. I knew somebody who he went to Brother Martin, and he was a college roommate of mine. And I had to pick him up out in New Orleans East. I'm thinking, okay, that's not far from downtown. No, that was a ride. That was a ride out there. I was like, where the hell am I? Because I'm 18, 19 years old. I've never driven out there. So, yeah, that was New Orleans East is something. But anyway, so Ed Daniels then he got into television. And this is where I was going with the story before I got sidetracked. Back then, the only Saints news you got during the season was either the local television sportscast, the local paper, Times-Picayune, and that's really it. Monday and sports talk, which Buddy D'Alberto hosted on WWL-FM, AM and FM. Then they came out, WGNO came out with Saints Sideline, which was a show dedicated just for Saints football. Came on once a week, but it was just about Saints football. And you could see draft stuff, you could see off-season activities, all the things that you see now on the internet every day. Mm-hmm. That's where it kind of started from, Saints Sideline. And he would have reporters that went out there and would interview Saints players. And it was the only way you really got your fill of Saints news was via this program. I can remember in 1994 when the Saints drafted Joe Johnson. Here's Ed Daniels out there, and I can't remember the other guy's name that was with him. Somebody else from WGNO Sports. I'm trying to think of his name. I can picture him. God, it'll come to me later on. It's a simple name. I just can't think of who it is. And Anna, NOPD riding horseback on our school grounds. It was that rough, huh? I won't talk about John Ehret. John Ehret was another one that was had JPSO out in helicopters hovering the fields and stuff because of riots. But anyway, the point of these stories were it was a good way of staying in touch with Saints news. Thank you. Alexander Laurent, thank you. I could not think of that man's name to save my life. I could picture him. I knew exactly what he looked like, and I knew his voice and everything. I just could not think of his name. He was another reporter for WGNO News. Anyway, it was a really, really good show. And then, of course, the internet kind of killed that show. But, I mean, that was your basic source of news. And they also had, the coaches show. And as the other channels would lose, the Jim Morris show or the Bum Phillips show, whatever like that, here's St. WGNO, Ed Daniels hosting another coaches show. So it was he was really, really important in keeping the Saints news as close as he could to 24/7 coverage. So he was a really important figure, and he is probably one of the last ones left from the old guard. Brian Ali Walsh is gone. Pete Finney's passed on. Buddy Alberto, of course, passed on. Hap Glaudy's long gone. All the old guard has disappeared. So, you've got now young reporters who are covering the Saints. Nick Underhill, of course, is in the foremost headliner. But, I mean, just because of the way they cover sports now, he has taken over the reins as being that 24/7 Saints guy. The rest of them just are following him, honestly. I mean,
sad but true.
But yeah, I mean, you think about it, and Jeff Duncan tries, but Jeff Duncan doesn't do what he does. And it's a lot of it is because of the type of reporting they do now. The networks, the three big networks in this town, they do their Saints reports, and they do 4th Down on 4, and they do, Saints, what do they go? Final Play on WVUE and the Fox affiliate and that kind of stuff. But it's nothing like, they just don't have they don't have the bandwidth, and they don't have the interest by the fans, because the news is happening so fast and old already that podcasts and everything else have just kind of taken that role away, because the news is so easily more accessible than they ever were. The Saints are much more accessible than they ever were. So it's a well due award for Ed Daniels. I mean, it really is. It's just a reminder how the city used to be. So speaking of old Saints and stuff, let's look at that defense, because when we started the show tonight, we were talking about the difficulty in getting, I guess, the greatest ever players, because so many of the newer players have now joined that list. Like, take your defensive ends. 10 years ago, we're probably putting Will Smith at the top. We're probably still throwing Frank Warren in there, Jim Wilkes, Leroy Glover. But that's changed now. Who do you think tops the list now as best defensive end? I think that's an easy softball question, but yeah.
Yeah, it is. And you want to try to answer without the recency bias, but recency bias or not, just the achievements on the field, it's got to be Cam Jordan. You've got to start the conversation with Cam Jordan. Now, I mean, you can, Will Smith, personally, Will Smith doesn't crack my top 5.
He doesn't either. It's a shame, but he doesn't.
Yeah. But I mean, it also is a testimony to how many good defensive linemen have rolled through New Orleans. Wayne Martin, Frank Warren, Joe Johnson, they are in my top 5. They edge out Leroy Glover only because Leroy only played a few years in New Orleans, while Warren, Martin, Johnson, they all had longer careers. Having said that, and you could say Derlin Moore too, Bob Pollard, Doug Atkins are in the Saints Hall of Fame, but none of them have played as long or have been as productive for as long as Cam Jordan. So again, I hate the recency bias. I do, but you have to start the conversation of Saints defensive linemen with Cameron Jordan.
It's so hard because Leroy Glover is probably one of my all-time favorite defensive linemen for the Saints. He and Derlin Moore are my 2 all-time favorites. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, Cam Jordan has all the records now. Cam Jordan has the sack record. Even if you count Ricky Jackson's 8 sacks from 1981, his rookie year, before sacks an official statistic, Cam Jordan now still beats him, which is an amazing statistic if you think about it. Because Ricky Jackson, to me, and we'll talk more about the linebackers in a minute, but Ricky Jackson was a defensive end who became a linebacker. And I think he is still, I saw this stat the other day, he is still the only Saint who has 1,000 career tackles as a Saint. And I think Cam Jordan is like at 462 or something ridiculous like that. So, to have that many tackles, and a lot of it does come from the fact that he played linebacker, but Demario Davis isn't close to him. No one else is close to him. It just is a testament to the work ethic of Cam Jordan, the production of a Cam Jordan, that he is able to come and overcome a statistic like all-time sacks from a player like Ricky Jackson, who is just that dominant. There's Ricky right there. That dominant of a player. There's Brett Maxie right there. Look at this. They know so well what we're going to do. Stan Brock. But yeah, it's just an amazing accomplishment. And yeah, Cam, I'm putting Cam in my all-time, from now on, all-time greatest defensive end. I'm probably putting Joe Johnson on the other side, because I'm kicking Wayne Martin to the inside at defensive tackle. Wayne Martin is somebody who I feel like he is the greatest saint that no one ever talks about.
Yes.
An amazing, he got 15 and a half sacks, okay, in 1992, I think. The year that Pat Swilling got 17 sacks. So it's not like, okay, he was the guy that just had a great year. No, 15 and a half sacks in a 3-4 scheme where his job was basically to tie up the blockers so the linebackers can flow to the ball carrier. And he is beating his blocks and getting to the quarterback.
Yep.
And very few people think about that. 15 and a half sacks. Let me just look at something real quick, because I know Leroy Glover is the only other one who got 17 sacks.
Yeah.
I want to see compared to Cam Jordan's best year.
Cam had 15, I think, in his best year. So, not what Wayne had, or maybe tied what Wayne had. I don't remember if Wayne's was 15 or 15 and a half.
He tied. He tied Wayne. He had 15 and a half sacks in 2019. That's just amazing. Wayne Martin is just, and he was just a steady performer. He could play the run and rush the passer. And people just didn't think about that, because he was in a 3-4 scheme. His little salute wasn't much of one. He just kind of, I don't know if you can see my hands, he just kind of do this little finger gun thing. And that was it. He was done. Quiet player, just dominant. And he never went to the Pro Bowl either, kind of like Marcus Colston. And his problem was he played the same position and the same time as John Randall of the Minnesota Vikings. And Randall ran his mouth. And I don't mean that to be derogatory, but he was a guy NFL films loved to mic up because he talked. He ran his mouth. And he made a big deal when he got to the quarterback and got the sack. And it's one of those things that people just, you got to make a name for yourself. You've got to make a spectacle of yourself to an extent to get your play noticed in the NFL. And it was just one of those things that that's not Wayne Martin's style.
No.
Just a quiet defensive tackle. So we mentioned Dylan Moore. Who would you put it at the big space eater guy next to him? Are you going to put Jim Wilkes there, or are you going to go somebody else?
Yeah, I got Jim Wilkes.
Okay.
Everything that you said about everything that we just said about both Wayne Martin, you could say about Frank Warren and Jim Wilkes too. They were so important to the Saints' defensive success, so important to the success of the Dome Patrol linebackers. All four of those guys, Ricky, Pat, Vaughn, Sam, they were great individually and as a unit for sure. No doubting that. But they had defensive linemen like Frank Warren, Wayne Martin, and Jim Wilkes ahead of them. That those guys almost by themselves commanded double teams. Who are you going to leave free out of that front seven? God. And I think I said it last week. I know I've said it before, that if the New Orleans Saints even win one Super Bowl between 1987 and 1993, that Dome Patrol unit is discussed right alongside the 85 Bears and the Steel Curtain and the Ravens defenses, and we can go on. And the Dome Patrol unit, the Giants defenses. Moore's defenses, led by the Dome Patrol and that defensive line, they were every bit as talented, every bit as respected, and every bit as feared as any of those other units were through the 1980s and 90s.
Yeah, Jim Wilkes was a 12th round pick too. And
Mhm.
we don't even have 12 rounds anymore in the draft, but he was a 12th round pick. And to me, he was the key. He was a linchpin. That's not to say that guys that had playing nose tackle before him weren't dominant, because clearly Tony Elliott was, Derlin Moore before that. But Jim Wilkes moved over from defensive end to defensive tackle, and he had these long arms, and he really knew how to tie up blockers. Now, he retired in 1993 because he came to the Saints in 81, and I think that's when he started to decline in 93. And you start getting other guys coming in to replace him to play his position and stuff. I think when those things happened, that's where the Dome Patrol, that great defense, kind of fell off. They stopped being able to stop the run as well as they did because, you didn't have a guy like Jim Wilkes in there. Jim Wilkes is another one who's incredibly underrated. I'm gonna throw
Alan,
another name
sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, okay.
Look at the number 94 in New Orleans Saints history.
Oh, yeah.
Cam Jordan, Jim Wilkes, Joe Johnson, all three Saints Hall of Famers, and even Charles Grant, who was a really, really good defensive end in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
There's only been 5 guys to wear number 94 for the Saints, and we just named 4 of them. I mean, you just talk about talent after talent and they all, with the exception of a 1-year gap, and go and read my column on Athlon Sports, the countdown to kickoff jersey history in 94. There was a 1-year gap between I think it was Charles Grant and when Cam came along. Other than that, it'd be like Wilkes retired, you draft Joe Johnson the next year. Johnson goes, you draft Charles Grant, then you have 1 year, and then you draft Cam. It was literally one right after another. It was just incredible. I love doing these historical pieces, but when I do the jersey countdowns, I won't lie, those pieces exhaust me, like physically and mentally. But they're still fun to do. 94 is my favorite piece to do, though.
94 is a heck of a number. It really is in Saints history because, like you said, those players that we just went through. And it also shows you how good the Saints have been. And we're talking about multiple staffs. We've talking about multiple GMs drafting guys who have had impacts, drafting good defensive linemen. So, people kind of get mad when the Saints say, oh, God, here we're going to draft another defensive tackle or defensive end. Oh, here we go. We're going to draft another offensive lineman. Guys, when you look at the position the Saints have had the most success in, it has been defensive end and, believe it or not, offensive line. We're in a lull right now, but for a while there, we were hitting on those positions like nobody's business. Linebacker is not a good position for the Saints traditionally. No. You take the Dome Patrol out, and we're going to talk about the linebackers in a minute, but you take the Dome Patrol out, you'd be hard pressed to name 4 linebackers that could play behind those guys. Yeah, Demario Davis and Jonathan Villeneuve. When we get to the linebackers, I'm going to start throwing out a couple of names and see how you feel about some of these guys, because the question is longevity, and also impact for the long term. We've had guys had these 1-year wonders or 3-year wonder windows, but then they never, ever became these great players who the league recognized and Saints fans recognized for a long time as being some of the best players in the league, not just best Saints. But the guy I was going to bring up, because you did 97 as well. We talked about a little bit about Leroy Glover. Jumpy Gathers.
Love Jumpy Gathers. Love watching him play.
Great, and I'm putting Wayne Martin ahead of Jumpy Gathers because, ironically, Wayne Martin replaced Jumpy as a starter. But Jumpy Gathers was just a great, great player. He had my favorite play that he would do when he decided it was time for the Saints to get a turnover or get a big play. He would do what he called the human forklift, where he would come in, get his arms up under the other players' armpits and pick them up off the ground and walk them back to the quarterback or the running back or whomever and just run that play right to him. I mean, I've only seen Cam Jordan do something close to that one time.
Reggie White was famous for it.
As a Saints player.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no, I've seen Reggie White do it with the hump move.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just an incredible movement just to pick up a guy, and you decide you're going to do that. I'm going to pick up this guy, and I'm going to walk him back to the quarterback. Unfortunately, he got a knee injury with the Saints. So Wayne Martin replaced him. He goes off in Plan B or free agency, goes to Washington. I think he won a Super Bowl at Washington.
I think so.
In 91. And then he finished his career, unfortunately, with the damn Falcons. But he was never the impact player he was when he was with the Saints. Is there any other defensive lineman we haven't talked about?
Not in this class, not in this category. And I mean, again, that's just a testament to how many talented defensive linemen we didn't talk enough about Derlin Moore or Will Smith. We didn't talk at all about Bruce Clark. Willie Whitehead had a couple really good years. Or even Sheldon Rankins and David Onyemata. They played at near a Pro Bowl level for at least a couple years each, but none of those guys, even Jumpy, I wouldn't put any of those guys in the category of the Cam and Wayne Martin, Frank Warren, Leroy Glover, Joe Johnson, Jim Wilkes. None of them are in that stratosphere for me.
Yeah, as much as I love Leroy Glover, he was part of that great defensive line for 2000 with Norman Hand, Joe Johnson, who we did talk about, second round pick that we drafted that year. Darren Howard.
Yeah, Darren
Howard. Who actually ended up finishing his career at Philadelphia. But, for a year, that defense, the 2000 defense, was one of the best ever. They had 66 sacks. No Saints defense has come close to that. And it was in large part to that defensive line. Joe Johnson, Darren Howard, and Leroy Glover all had double-digit sacks that year. So, just an incredible defense. Derlin Moore, a guy who had said once with Bum Phillips he would play any position because he just wanted to win. After being with so many bad Saints teams, there's one right behind us. There's 79 Saints. That infamous Monday night game, Derlin Moore was in that game. He was just looking for the opportunity to play with a great defense for a change. Bruce Clark is somebody who gets ignored a lot. Again, somebody who just had a couple of good years with the Saints. He came from the CFL. He was a first-round draft pick. Did not report to the Packers, so the Saints traded for him in 1983, losing the opportunity to draft a quarterback out of that class, ironically. Yeah. But you got a good player with Bruce Clark. He was there until 87. But, again, you're just not enough guys to have this long-term, success with the Saints. Doug Atkins, somebody else you mentioned earlier, 3 years left in the league. He was in his late 30s, a mountain of a man, 6'7", I think his height was, something like that. His best days were behind him. And yet here he comes to an expansion team and was one of the best defensive linemen still in the league. And his very last play as a Saint, he sacked the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback in 1969. So just a great way to go out. great way to go out. So linebackers, because now we're getting into the 80s and the Saints. Obviously, the Dome Patrol. But if you had to say you can only pick 4 linebackers in all of Saints history to represent the team, are you still picking Jackson, Swilling, Mills, and Johnson, or where does Demario Davis and Jonathan Vilma fit in there?
Don't get me wrong, I like Vilma a lot. I love Vaughn Johnson, but my 4 linebackers in this order, if I had to rank them 1 to 4, are Ricky Jackson, Sam Mills, Demario Davis, and Pat Swilling. Those are the 4 that I'm rolling with. Those are the 4 that I'm going to dominate any offense in any era under any rules, Goodell. And Vaughn and Vilma, they could replace any of those 4, and you wouldn't lose much, if any. But yeah, I'm rolling with Ricky, Mills, Demario, and Pat.
It's amazing because it's hard for me not to cut out any of those players.
Yeah,
because if you would just ask somebody, okay, which one looks like a linebacker out of those 4? It's Vaughn Johnson.
It's Vaughn Johnson.
Who is the hardest hitter out of those 4? It's Vaughn Johnson.
Vaughn Johnson.
Sam Mills is a close second, but Sam Mills hit you because he was short. He was already in the right position to get you right at the chin. But yeah, Vaughn Johnson, I've told this story 1,000 times. I'll tell it my whole life. But Vaughn Johnson's the guy in 1990 or 90. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, 91. Challenging the 49ers to go for it on fourth and a foot. Go for it. He is pointing at the head coach, not just the bench. He's pointing at the head coach, telling him, come on, let's go. I want to see if you could go put Rathman back there. Let's see if he can get that touchdown. And he makes the play for the loss. I mean, that's a man who talks the talk and backs it up. I love Vaughn Johnson. I love all of them. But
yeah,
at the same time, I'm with you. Demario, by success, has surpassed those guys. But I still think all 4 of these guys should be in the Saints Ring of Honor. And it really pisses me off that they're not. In
my opinion, that not only as individual players, I think that they should create a specific Dome Patrol Ring of Honor. A Ring of Honor plaque, Ring of Honor banner, whatever. Because I mean, these guys were not just that damn good; they were that damn meaningful to New Orleans Saints football.
That's the identity of that team. You look at those Saints teams from Jim Moore's first year, 86 to 93. Okay. Pat Swilling worked his way in. By 87, he's a starter. Vaughn Johnson had to work his way in. Vaughn Johnson was originally, they had Vaughn Johnson on the bench. You had Alvin Tolles in there a lot in the beginning. Those 2 kind of worked their way in, and became starters. So by 87, that's when the team got to be good. And by 88, that's when the Dome Patrol was officially announced, as the name of the team, the defense. But it's like the Steel Curtain, the Steel Curtain was supposed to be the Steelers' front 4. The Dome Patrol was the 4 linebackers. And that was the identity of the team. Nobody else, you couldn't name, outside of Saints fans, they couldn't name the guys who were on the offense. They knew who Morton Anderson was, but you couldn't identify the rest. But you knew who those 4 linebackers were. So I know, and it's really tough because now you have to take one out to have 4 linebackers to include the success that Demario Davis has.
Yeah.
So outside of Davis and Vilma, is there another linebacker in the Saints history that you think deserves to be in there?
No, not even close. Not even close, and that's only because of how good those 6 guys were. And again, I throw Vilma into that mix. If I'm going to list a top 10 of Saints linebackers after my top 6, I'd probably go Joe Fetterspiel at 7. Mark Fields was a really, really good linebacker too. Scott Shanley was good. I was a Keith Mitchell fan. He only had a really, really good 2 or 3 year run. But he was a damn good linebacker. And I think if he stays healthy for longer, I think that Keith Mitchell was talented enough in his overall game, to maybe have an argument for being mentioned in the top 6. But that if I'm rounding up my top 10, that's who it is Fetterspiel, Fields, Shanley, Mitchells. I forgot about Alvin Tolles though, and he was pretty darn good too.
Well, he didn't last very long, and he got supplanted by. He was a former first-round pick too in '85, former first-round pick, and then he got supplanted by Vaughn Johnson. It's funny, like you said, and I'm going to address your question in a minute, Anna, because I have mixed feelings about this now. I used to feel very much that you swap LT and Ricky Jackson. That Ricky Jackson, everybody we talking about RJ, not LT. But I'm sort of changing my mind a little bit on that, and I'll tell you why in a second. But anyway, when you start looking at these linebackers, Doc Kovac is another guy who comes to mind.
Yeah.
Number 52. He was a cerebral linebacker, but he was going to be a doctor. He was in medical school while he was playing. And when he was ready to finish medical school, he kind of checked out of football and bumped traded to the 49ers, and he played for a year with the 49ers and went on to medical school. And it's unfortunate because he was a really good linebacker. But, the rest of the guys that are on this list that we're looking at were guys that had 1 or 2 good years with the Saints, but were not dominant guys. How about Scott Fujita? How do you feel about him?
Similar to Shanley, they were both really good players. I think they were made better by the fact that they had Vilma there. Yeah. Just like Demario Davis makes everybody, any Saints linebacker look at least competent. I think the Scots, Shanley and Fujita, while solid players in their own right, I think if Jonathan Vilma wasn't there, they wouldn't have been as good.
Well, you had that actually in 2006.
Right.
When 2006, 2007, before Vilma showed up. I agree. I agree with you. I think Fujita and Shanley topped the very, very good list with probably Fetterspiel in the middle. Doc Kovac I put in that group too. After that, you got guys like Whitney Paul, Dennis Winston. And again, these are Bum Phillips linebackers because prior to Bum Phillips, linebacker corps sucked.
Yes.
That's putting it bluntly. They weren't good. They were not good. Joe Fetterspiel was a good player, but not a great one. And the guys they put around him were not good. They were, Jim Merlo, guys like that, guys it's just like, I don't know who that is. He's just not a very well-known player, not a memorable player, not a guy who was going to make plays. He was a guy who just was there and made tackles after the runner or the receiver got yardage. That's kind of what they were known for.
Yeah.
So in the linebackers that have come since, we all know them, that they just don't pan out to be great linebackers. A lot of mediocre to bad linebackers. Stephon Anthony tops that list.
Yeah.
So
Curtis Lofton.
Curtis Lofton. As good as the defensive line has been in Saints history, that's as bad as the Saints linebacking core has been.
Yeah, and I always take shots at the national media. It feels like weekly, so this will be my shot. You turn on you turn on a Saints game now, and the announcers are talking about Demario Davis continuing the great tradition of Saints linebackers, and I always kind of chuckle to myself, and I think these exact words, and sometimes I said it out loud to nobody. I'm like, you take out 1986 to 1993 out of Saints history, and the great tradition of Saints linebackers stops at Demario Davis and John Vilma, and that's it. And then, like you said, you have a couple good to very good ones, and then others that we're talking about. Well, they were competent, but and then fill in blank there.
Yeah, I mean, and we had Joe Lon Dunbar on this show at one time, and we mentioned the importance of number 56 because, like 94, there's a lot of good players in Saints history who worn 56. DeMario is just the latest example. Pat Swilling, obviously, but you haven't gotten to 56 yet because we're not that close. But Dennis Dirt Winston wore 56. So, those are three players I can think of that were in. Winston came from the Steelers. So it was a tradition of great linebacker play over there, too.
That's great linebacker play.
Yeah, he just could not get in a fair shot of getting in and playing. So that's why he was available for trade. But
by the way, I think if Joe Lon Dunbar doesn't wreck his knee, he has a very good Saints career. I don't know that we talk about him in the same light as the DeMarios and the other 56s on the list, or even Vilma. But I feel pretty confident that if Joe Lon Dunbar doesn't wreck his knee, he's probably at least in our top 10 conversation at the position.
He probably gets an opportunity to play longer and have more of an impact. And of course, that's one of our things that we knock these guys for is they just didn't stay with the Saints long enough to become a great player. So before I get to Sean's question here, how do you feel about Lawrence Taylor taking spotlight away from Ricky Jackson? Because Lawrence Taylor won the Super Bowl, so that was the first big thing. But Lawrence Taylor versus Ricky Jackson.
They're two slightly different players. Slightly. I do think that if Ricky Jackson was in that Bill Parcells, Bill Belichick defense, with or without, if you take Taylor out of there, Ricky is certainly more widely publicized than what he has been, but I think that's more the New York market, than anything else. LT, as much as I love Ricky, and I do, LT is the greatest football player I have ever seen, offense or defense, and certainly the greatest defensive player in NFL history. I think Ricky, if you swap places, Lawrence Taylor is still tremendous, and Ricky Jackson is more highly publicized than what he is, probably in the conversation of greatest of all time. But I don't really feel like Lawrence Taylor took notoriety away from Ricky Jackson. Lawrence Taylor just took notoriety away from everybody. He changed the game of football.
Playing in the New York market and playing for a major media team like the Giants, and of course the Giants win a Super Bowl, go to a couple of NFC Championship games, and just become a wrecking force because that whole defense was good, not just Lawrence Taylor.
Right.
But Lawrence Taylor is more comparable with another 56, Pat Swilling, than he is Ricky Jackson.
Exactly.
Ricky Jackson was a better run defender than Lawrence Taylor. But Lawrence Taylor was so damn explosive. It's probably because of the cocaine he was on, but he was so damn explosive and violent. Swilling was explosive as well. But, I don't want to diminish his ability because he was violent too. But Lawrence Taylor was a force, And I think that's really what gets people more than anything else is how violent he was when he hit. He didn't just hit you. I mean, he did the tomahawk chop to loosen the football from the quarterback's grasp, but it looked like he was breaking the dude's arm because his arm came down so violently and he hit you so hard. So he put that fear into guys, quarterbacks, where they had their head on a swivel. Where's Taylor? To an extent, Theismann talked about one time. He called a timeout. Oh, it might have been Theismann. It might have been Jaworski. Lawrence Taylor came out for a breather. I didn't want to say a blow, but he probably was coming out for a blow too. But he came out for a breather, and it has to be Jaworski. Jaworski called timeout because he couldn't find him. He kept looking for him. Where is he? Where is he coming from? So I know where to set the protection, and I can't find him because I know he's not off the field. He's just somewhere I don't see him. I got to call timeout because I don't know where he is, and he was on the sideline. So I mean, the Washington Redskins had to change their blocking scheme from a two-back to a single back because no left tackle could handle him by himself. They had to put a tight end over there just to slow him down.
Yeah, so, and you're talking about a Hall of Fame elite left tackle in Joe Jacoby. They couldn't handle him.
Yeah, and could not handle him. So, I think if Swilling and Jackson both are in New York and just Lawrence Taylor is here in New Orleans, they get the notoriety because the two of them were kind of like what Lawrence Taylor was, but the better run defenders. So I used to be that way though. I used to really be like, Lawrence Taylor. It's always Lawrence Taylor. What about Ricky Jackson? This man's busting his ass out here. And the Saints not getting the postseason success. They're getting knocked for that, and it's not those guys' fault because they're playing their asses off. It leads to Sean's question. Do you think Jim Mora would have replaced Carl Smith? The Saints might have gotten a Super Bowl with the Dome Patrol. I think it's more than Carl Smith.
Yeah, and it's kind of irrelevant for two reasons. Number one, it didn't happen, and number two, with Jim Mora, it wasn't going to happen. Carl Smith was one of his guys from the USFL. They were people always talk about Sean Payton hanging on to Joe Vitt and a couple of those other guys for so long. One of the reasons why was that Joe Vitt meant so much to Sean Payton personally. Carl Smith meant a lot to Jim Mora personally. Joe
Vitt's back with Sean Payton in Denver.
Right. But like you said, Alan, it was more than just Carl Smith. I mean, the play calling was maddening, to say the least. But you look at, and I've said this before, you look at the teams that the Saints had to overcome to get out of the NFC. We talk about the Giants. We mentioned the Bears before. I mean, hell, they had a legitimate, not a fake dynasty like the Patriots, a legitimate dynasty in the San Francisco 49ers in their own division. And then, by the way, in your own division, you also had, Everett's Rams, and before Everett, it was Eric Dickerson's Rams. The Falcons, much as we hate Atlanta, that 91 Glanville team was a damn good team.
Who'd you play in the playoffs? You played the Eagles, the Vikings, the Bears, teams that either won Super Bowls or got to NFC championship games.
Yep. And if you would have got by any of those teams, you would have had to face the Cowboys, 3 Super Bowls in 4 years, the Redskins, 3 Super Bowls in 5 years. I mean, that was the NFC was just a juggernaut. So, I mean,
the Giants,
borrow the Jim Mora coulda, woulda, shouldas. You coulda, woulda, and shoulda, but unfortunately you didn't. And as a result, it's still ring or no ring. It's positively criminal that Pat Swilling is not in the Hall of Fame, and that the Frank Warrens and Wayne Martins didn't get more notoriety. But unfortunately, it is what it was.
Well, the guy I'm gonna blame actually for Jim Moore not winning a playoff game and not going to the Super Bowl is Jim Finks, not Carl Smith.
Sure.
Although Carl Smith had his problems, Jim Finks' attitude about how to build a team was reflected in his draft choices. He never got the Saints the home run hitter wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
The Saints lost a lot of playoff games because they couldn't run the football. So he never really, he got Ironhead Hayward, who had weight problems and maturity problems while he was a Saint, but you never really got that bell cow running back. Imagine if in 1987, instead of drafting Sean Knight, you draft Thurman Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
How different would the Saints' playoff success have been with a Thurman Thomas
on that dome turf? Wow.
Yeah. Imagine them drafting a better wide receiver than Brett Perryman. Imagine them drafting a tight end who could do the kind of things that the 49ers were doing with their tight ends. He just did not. He had a great draft in 86 and he had a great draft in 93. But those drafts from 87 to 91 and 92 just were not great drafts. You only had a couple guys that were really good in the first round, but you had a lot of busts. And I think that is part of the problem. Bobby Hebert was not a great quarterback. He was a good quarterback, could manage a game, but if you had to rely on Hebert to win the game for you, he's going to make mistakes. So it was a lot of things. And I actually got to talk to Carl Smith one time. And Carl Smith, I don't know if I think I had that resting bitch face looking at him. I don't know what it was, but he kind of went on a rant in front of me, and I'm working a bookstore. Okay. I just know who you are. And he's actually a big man. You wouldn't realize he's as big as he is because he's small next to the NFL players. But he kind of went on this rant about how it wasn't his fault. And I'm just like, dude, I didn't say it was. I just said I know who you are. I think he got confronted a lot. But it was kind of funny. But after he said that stuff, I'm like, you know what? I can agree with that because Carl looked at the offense. I can only do with what I've got. I can only work with what I got. And I didn't get enough good players. And I put that on Finks because there was no free agency to build a draft. So, to build a team. So you had to build through the draft. That's a legitimate complaint. Sean has another question. Looking at the early sports books, Saints are the only favorites in one game. Is not having Carr really that great of a decline for this team?
No, it isn't. And I mean, as far as whether they're favorites or not, the Saints don't have Drew Brees. The Saints don't have a Ricky Jackson. The Saints don't have a face of the franchise that the NFL and Las Vegas wants to promote. And therefore, they're just, for lack of a better term, they're just going to shit on the Saints at every opportunity. They do not want the Saints to be relevant. You look at this roster and you have a hard time. We've talked about this. We'll certainly talk more in the upcoming weeks. It's hard to imagine the Saints being relevant this season. But I mean, the bottom line is the Roger Goodell Nazis, that run the league, also run Vegas, and it's all about perception. And the Saints don't have that face that you want to put on the cover of Madden, or that's going to be on the cover of different magazines. They don't have anybody that they want to, or that they feel that they can promote. And without Derek Carr, now the perception is, well, you don't have a veteran quarterback. Regardless that veteran quarterback was average to above average on his best days. You don't have a quarterback, and you didn't draft one that we wanted you to in a Jackson Dart or a Shedeur Sanders. So therefore, you're automatically going to suck. Because I've said it before about the schedule. I look at the schedule based off of the performances last year, and the current rosters on their current schedule, and I'm like, I could see the Saints winning 7 games, and if a lot of stuff goes right, going to even 9 or 10. It doesn't surprise me to hear that they're only favored in 1 game, but you look at the schedule and not through Fleur de Lis covered glasses, the real schedule and the opponents on it, and you're like, you know what, this is not that tough a schedule. I could care less I could care less whether they have them favored or not. We'll find out within the first 4 to 5 games, which it is a tough opening stretch. But we'll find out within the first 4 to 5 games, whether that disrespect throughout the league is warranted or not.
Well, and to directly address the Carr situation, they know what Derek Carr is capable of. They know who Derek Carr is and how many games you're going to win with a Derek Carr. They don't know who the Saints starting quarterback is going to be, and they don't know if depending on who it is, how many games that quarterback can win. Mm-hmm. They know that Spencer Rattler went 0-6 and didn't look that great. They know they got a rookie quarterback. They don't know how he's going to do. When's he going to start? Is he starting opening day? If he starts on opening day, what kind of quarterback is he going to be? How is he going to play? How many mistakes is he going to make? So that's why they're not favored. I think as the season goes on, some of those odds will change. Mm-hmm. You're right. The hardest part of the schedule is the first 4 games. And if they go 1-3 in those first 4 games and Shuck starts all 4 games, that's actually a good thing because that means that they're growing. That means this guy has got, kind of showing he deserves to be the starting quarterback. So there's a lot that's involved with this. But it mainly stems from, we don't know who the Saints, we don't even know what kind of team this is going to be. And that was the question we had last week. What's this identity of this team going to be? Don't know. What can you hang your hat on for this team to do well? Don't know yet.
Don't know.
So that's reflected in the odds. Mm-hmm. And all those things will change as they start to see what kind of team this really is going to be. Bob, what do you have coming up in the Bayou Blitz tomorrow night?
It looking like we're going on Thursday, maybe Friday this week, because I know Brendan is on the road, so we will not be having a Bayou Blitz tomorrow. I will be making an announcement whether we're going to have it Thursday or Friday, but we're definitely going to have it this week. As far as topic, I'm still working on a guest. We have a big official announcement now, we could say, from our sponsor, Get Checked or Check Out, regarding the 2026 Original Go Black and Gold Celebrity Charity Fan Cruise, which I went on this past year for the first time. We have the official dates and a new destination. So we're going to be talking about that. And whether I have a guest on or not will probably depend on the subject matter. But yep. And we're going to do it on this show too. We're going to start to talk about some potential training camp battles. Mm-hmm. Last week was a fun conversation. We talked, we went down position by position, and based off of the offseason acquisitions, did the Saints get better or worse? Now we're going to talk about potential roster dark horses to keep an eye on, breakthrough candidates, that kind of thing. Not just this week, but probably split up the topics over the next few weeks.
Yeah, that's the hardest part. There's gonna be a lot of training camp battles to watch, a lot of questions that need to be answered that we probably won't even get the answer until well into the preseason games.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think those having that kind of stuff straightened out will help people understand what kind of identity this team has, and who wins those training camp battles is key to whether this team is going to be successful or not. Quite honestly, I don't know how that's going to be. I really don't know. I know who I want to have win all the battles.
Right.
I want to have who I want the offensive line to be, who I want to have an impact as a running back on this team. Because I think the running game, we talked about this last week, the running game is the key to this team being successful. So
no doubt.
Okay, so Bayou Blitz on Friday night. Who are you trying to line up as a guest? Can you say?
I can't say at this point because it might be two of them. But it depends on what night we can go and what they have going on. So
I got you. Well, check out the Bayou Blitz. See if they have his mystery guest parentheses the S in there. And in the meantime, we'll see you next week on Under the Dome. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.